global headlines from an African perspective.
It's Wednesday, the 1st of October 2025. The time is just gone 2100 Central African Time. Good evening and welcome to Africa World Hour. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective, broadcasting live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Of course, you can catch us live on SABC Plus app, DSTV's audio bouquet, Channel 802, and on OpenView, Channel 628. I'm in for Tsepiso Makwetla. My name is Innocent Semosa, and I'm with you until for the next hour. This is the African perspective.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
Let's then look at Africa World Hour top stories. Onto this now. The family of South Africa's late Nathi Mthethwa says they haven't received any formal communication from the African National Congress Party as well as national government regarding his passing. The 58-year-old ambassador to France died in Paris yesterday after he reportedly fell from the 22nd floor of the Hyatt Regency Hotel. The family is currently gathered at Mthethwa's homestead at KwaMbonambi on the KwaZulu-Natal North Coast. Family spokesperson is Maswakupi Mthethwa.
The family is saddened and we're still in disbelief that this actually happened. There are two things that I would like to touch on. The first one being that while we're still in communication with the brother of Nathi's wife, and she was letting us know that our son had passed, on our way home to inform the family, the news had already been publicized and the public knew more details than the family.
Allies of the former president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Joseph Kabila, have rejected the death sentence handed to him by a military tribunal, calling it illegal and politically motivated. He was sentenced to death in absentia for crimes against humanity, treason, and backing the M23 rebels in eastern Congo. The BBC's Paul Njay reports.
The Common Front for Congo, which includes parties allied to Joseph Kabila, said there was growing dictatorship and instrumentalization of the justice system for political gain. In a statement, the opposition group added that the conviction process was illegal and unacceptable. Nehemi Mwilanya, the former chief of staff of Kabila's administration, also described the verdict as a political decision aimed at excluding the ex-president from the political scene. A lawyer representing the plaintiffs celebrated the court ruling and accused the former leader of supporting the rebel movements in the country.
And back home, South Africa's firebrand Economic Freedom Fighters Party leader Julius Malema says he's going to appeal the guilty verdict against him, which was handed down by the East London Magistrate Court in the Eastern Cape province. Malema was found guilty for unlawfully possession of a firearm, ammunition, and discharging a firearm in public during the EFF's 5th anniversary celebration at Sisa Dukushe Stadium in Mdantsane. His former bodyguard and co-accused Adrian Snyman was found not guilty by the same court. Malema says he finds it strange that Snyman was cleared of all charges, yet he is the one who is alleged to have handed the firearm to him.
They said accused number 2 gave me the firearm. Now they are releasing me, which means he didn't give me the firearm. Why are you not releasing me? When you release a person you allege gave me the firearm. By releasing accused number 2, the whole case should have collapsed. But the racist was looking for me, and that's why they could not collapse the case for racist reason, to appease the AfriForum, to appease the Oval Office of Donald Trump.
Now, experts have warned that uncertainty over job and trade still hangs over South Africa following the expiration of the African Continental, or should I say African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. Political economist Professor Patrick Bond says in the absence of any relief on AGOA, South Africa's goal will not face standard tariffs on exports to the United States. This while certain products such as copper, pharmaceuticals and certain minerals are exempted. Bond says U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs on South African goods have led to a sharp drop in the country's exports to the U.S. during the second quarter of this year.
So we're still at 30%, and I think for the most crucial exports hit hard now are, since end of July, are in citrus and the vineyard products, the wine and the grapes, and also macadamia nuts. So we're going to see lots of job losses in agriculture.
And now oil workers in Nigeria have agreed to call off a strike after talks with government officials and management and the Dangote refinery owned by Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote. The strike had forced Nigerians' grid operator to ration electricity to avoid a national blackout as gas supplies plunged on the second day of the walkout by workers at the refinery. The BBC's Ijoma Dugwe has more.
Officials at the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria say the row was triggered after more than 800 of its members were dismissed from the Dangote refinery for joining the union. After a 2-day impasse, management at what is Africa's largest refinery has agreed to reassign staff to other jobs within the Dangote group without loss of pay. The Labour Minister, who mediated the talks, told the meeting that unionisation was a right of workers and should be respected.
Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mokoenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
All right, on to this now. Today, Nigeria marks 65 years of independence, an occasion that is both celebrated and reflective. But this year, the mood is tempered by economic hardship. In a national address, President Bola Tinubu sought to reassure citizens, declaring that the West is over. His administration has embarked on sweeping economic reforms, scrapping the decades-old fuel subsidy and unifying the country's multiple exchange rates. Now, Tinubu insists that the measures were necessary to reset the Nigeria's struggling economy. To talk about this further, we're joined on the line by Dr. Muyusolua Dile Dala. She is, of course, a lecturer at Miva Open University, Department of Public Policy and Administration in Nigeria. But before we talk to her, let's take a listen to what President Bola Tinubu had to say earlier today.
For decades, the promise of our independence has been tested by profound social, economic, and political challenges, and we have survived. While we may not have achieved all the lofty dreams of our forebearers, we have not strayed too far from them. In 65 years since our independence, we have made tremendous progress in economic growth, social cohesion, and physical development. Our economy has experienced significant growth since 1960. Although it is much easier for those whose vocation is to focus solely on what ought to be, we must recognize and celebrate our significant progress. Nigeria today have access to better education and healthcare than in 1960. At independence, Nigeria had 120 secondary schools with a student population of about 130,000. Available data indicate that as of year 2024, there were more than 23,000 secondary schools in our country. At independence, we had only the University of Ibadan and Yaba College of Technology as the two tertiary institutions in Nigeria. By the end of last year, there were 274 universities, 183 polytechnics, and 236 colleges of education in Nigeria, comprising federal, state, and private institutions. We have experienced a significant surge in growth across every sector of our national life since independence. In healthcare, infrastructure, financial services, manufacturing, telecommunications, information, technology, aviation and defense, among others. Our country has experienced both the good and the bad times in its 65 years of nationhood. As it's normal for every nation and it is people. We fought a bitter and unavoidable civil war, experienced military dictatorships, and lived through major political crises. In all this, we weathered every storm and overcame every challenge with courage, grit, and uncommon determination.
That's Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu there, addressing the national address of the Nigeria marking 65 years of independence. All right, to talk to us further about, reflecting on his speech and what is happening in Nigeria, we're joined now on the line by Dr. Moyo Solua Dele Dada. Doctor, thank you so very much for making the time and welcome to Channel Africa.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, President Bola Tinubu says the West is over. Based on current economic indicators, does this, claim hold water? Or because some people can say, hang on, this sounds like more like a political reassurance?
Okay, thank you for that question. So to answer that question, it depends on what perspective you're looking at it from. And while Mr. President has made major attempts to improve the economy of Nigeria, the effects of such actions are not visible yet. However, this is not to say that the effects of those actions are not in existence, because even the IMF affirmed that there has been significant, consistent economic growth in Nigeria's economy. However, it's still too low. And as such, this growth or these changes in the economy are not visible yet to the common man. Because the common man is basically concerned about the cost of food, the cost of transportation, how much money he still has in his pocket, after paying his bills. And Mr. President is saying, the worst is off and, the best is to come next. And that makes no sense to the common man because things are still very much expensive. Transportation is still very much expensive. The cost of food is still very high. And it's just not visible yet, but that is not to say it is absent.
Yeah, it's not visible yet, and but it does look like it's going to take some time. And maybe what he's saying is that we need to be patient with the process. But how sustainable are the reforms, for an example, in fuel subsidy removal and forex, unification in the long term, given the short-term pain Nigerians are experiencing at the moment?
Well, it is sustainable, but it is going to cost an average Nigerian a whole lot. Because if we're talking about sustainable development, a type of development that allows even those who come after us to be able to experience a better life, these are sacrifices that we have to make. But it is going to cost the average man a lot of things, because I believe that things might still get tighter than what they currently are right now. Because if you look at what the IMF said, there's a consistent growth, but the growth is still too low, too low. And for us to pick up the pace, there's still certain things that would need to be done. And, it's almost like saying it's going to get worse before it gets better. So it's still a long road ahead for Nigeria.
Yeah, and I understand that in your article that you recently published, that gives a comparison with Nigeria now and during COVID-19. You published it yesterday. You highlighted the fact that a vast number of Nigerians living in extreme poverty. And having heard what the president is saying, do you see a man in touch with the realities that are facing a vast majority of Nigerians? Or would you say that he's failing to read the temperature outside of his office?
Okay, so I would say that the president is not taking all factors into consideration. So what he is doing in a way is fine, but he is not taking all the factors in play into consideration. For example, in terms of policy making, most of these policies targeted at alleviating poverty in Nigeria tend to be income-centric rather than people-centric. And as such, those policies have a sort of top-down approach in their formation and implementation. And that means that the realities of those who are even affected by these maintenance, it's not being put into consideration in the formulation of these policies that are created to alleviate poverty. And what this means is that those that the policy is designed to assist or to help end up not being able to benefit from that particular policy. Because at the end of the day, you cannot provide for people when you do not even know what they want. It's like saying, I want salt, but then you're giving me sugar. I have no use for sugar, but you're giving me sugar when I need salt. So I think Mr. President needs to consider other factors in play aside from what he has focused on so far.
Yeah, let's then talk about the long term here. And then the question is, could these reforms deepen inequality and poverty before yielding the benefits that the president is talking about and the benefits that he's promising? And how might that impact political instability in the country? Because I'm asking, we've been seeing a lot of protests in different African nations because of the issues of where citizens are not happy with government. Is that where we're going now, where this might come with a lot of pain before we see the benefits that the president is promising?
Yes, definitely. This is going to come with a lot of pain, and it's a very long ride for Nigerians. Yes, it will deepen inequality, definitely, because right now the salary scale has not improved, even though we've seen an increase in the minimum wage, so to say. But the cost of things and the minimum wage is not, there's no balance to it, because before you know it, your salary is gone and you've not even paid all the bills you have to pay. And there's also a matter of multidimensional poverty, which goes beyond just income. So we have access to healthcare, access to education, clean water, amongst others. So even if the income part is sorted, if you spend all of your salary on, basic things that should be made available for you on a normal day, you also have to then find a way to address things like healthcare, education, and I fear that that may even lead to an increase in the number of out-of-school children that we have today. And so the implication of this in political stability is that the people are going to get very impatient. I believe Nigerians are already so angry to begin with. And so they're going to get very impatient. I believe that we may see lots of protests. But because of the nature of protests in Nigeria, people are still being very careful. But you can only push people to a certain point before they push back. So once they get to that point where they do not care, I believe that they are going to take the streets. And, we operate a democratic system. So it means that we have periodic election. So there's always a choice of voting him out of power if they're not okay with his type of government.
Yeah, and Doctor, just before I let you go, if I hear you correctly, you're saying that Tinubu's message is likely not to resonate with ordinary Nigerians facing, rising costs of food, as you indicated, transport and basic services.
Yes, definitely. It will never resonate with the common man, because the common man doesn't care what GDP is. He doesn't care what foreign reserve is about. He cares about food on his table, transportation, and the money he has left in his pocket. You're telling me that there's an increase, or the economy has become better, but I'm then asking how? Because the cost of things is still high. The cost of food is still high. The cost of transportation is still high. The cost of basic amenities is still high. So I am not saying the changes we're talking about. And so definitely not going to resonate with the common man.
All right. Dr. Mayo Solua Dele Dada, thank you so very much for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, there you have it. That conversation brings us to exactly 21:22 Central African Time. This is Africa World Hour on Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu masuala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo unataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
Let's bring it to SADC now. Botswana marked 59 years of independence this week under unusually subdued circumstances. With government unable to fund the traditional celebrations, many citizens turned to social soccer to mark the day. In his maiden independence address, President Duma Boko urged unity even as the country edges closer to crisis. Channel Africa's Shingarai Mandondo reports from Gaborone.
This monumental musical instrumentation was meant to vibrate through the terraces at the National Stadium in Gaborone, Botswana's capital city, on this Independence Day. But it was never to be, as the Southern African country is facing serious financial crisis stemming from a collapse in diamond revenues, thereby straining public finances and fueling social tensions. It is against this backdrop that President Duma Boko has pleaded with the citizens to remain united and work towards a common goal of confronting the country's socio-economic challenges in a collective manner.
We are a force to reckon when we are united and working together. It is our togetherness that is the umbrella for democratic change. We made history by dethroning former ruling Botswana Democratic Party from power. It is only when we work in unison that we can overcome all the challenges that our country is facing and enduring, whether small or big. The African continent can only heal from the current crisis and develop socially and economically by working together. It is only through coordination that all the countries across the globe can confront and overcome the challenges bedeviling the international community.
Bokon said the country can only emerge from the current economic crisis that saw the Southern African country declaring a state of health emergency after health institutions ran out of medicines. Diamonds account for 80% of the country's exports and a third of government income, but demand has plunged amid the rise of cheaper lab-grown gems, slowing sales in the United States and weak laser demand in China. The Botswana government projects a fiscal deficit of 11% of gross domestic product GDP in 2025, the widest in the sub-Saharan Africa, with debt expected to double to 43% of the gross domestic product. Botswana Democratic Party Executive Secretary Ami Makoba said it has never happened in the history of Botswana that the country's Independence Day is celebrated without festivities and feasting.
I have come to the conclusion that it's necessary for me to intervene. Botswana expected a lot out of government. The government has not been able to honor the standard that has been set by previous governments. I've had no choice but to slaughter a few goats, a few sheep for people at least in my local community in order that Botswana can enjoy what they have come to know as Botswana Day. You cannot have Boipuso and an extra day over and above the ordinary established holidays of Boipuso and not have the festivities associated with it.
Botswana, once known as Bechuanaland during the colonial period, is now called for its majority ethnic group, the Tswana, and has garnered worldwide renown as a peaceful and growing affluent democratic state since independence. Reporting for Channel Africa from Gaborone here in Botswana, this is Ashingre Matondo.
All right, business leaders, investors and entrepreneurs gathered in Johannesburg, South Africa at the Invest Fest 2025, a premier destination for business to learn, network and grow. The event explored new corporates, investors and development, or should I say development partners could unlock greater flows of capital into small and medium enterprises and how this fuels job creation, innovation and inclusive growth. Channel Africa's Ntantla Mahlangu reports.
More than 300 entrepreneurs, investors, corporates and development agencies attended the 2025 edition of Invest Fest in Johannesburg, South Africa. Hosted by Anglo America's Impact Finance Network, the business and networking extravaganza blended financial empowerment and culture into one powerful conference dedicated to financial literacy, business growth and networking. Nolita Fakude, chair of Anglo America's South African Management Board, said they are determined to play their part in partnering to build a better future for all stakeholders in Southern Africa.
That commitment has never been more important than it is today for us, especially as we embrace the exciting future possibilities ahead of us with the recently announced merger of Anglo-American with Tech Resources. As Anglo-Tech, we will be a stronger, more competitive global leader in the mining industry. And what this means, rather, for South Africa is that we are even better positioned to support the attainment of our country's national priorities, including entrepreneurial development and the growth of small and medium enterprises, thus help reduce unemployment.
She says she's optimistic about what can be achieved when working together.
The continued growth of the Impact Finance Network demonstrates that there is both appetite and capacity for impact investment in our markets. Most importantly, the energy and innovation I see from entrepreneurs across South Africa gives us all confidence that we are building something truly sustainable and transformative. The small and medium enterprises we support through the IFN and our programs are not just businesses, they are the backbone of economic transformation in South Africa. They represent opportunity, progress, and the practical reality of how we build a more inclusive economy. Therefore, ours in this investment festival today is to deliberate on how we as partners can raise the bar, especially because building entrepreneurial resilience is a shared responsibility, one that calls on all of us to think beyond our individual interests and towards collective impact.
The event featured trade and opportunity roundtables exploring high-potential trade and investment opportunities in Zambia, Botswana, and South Africa's Northern Cape. These interactive sessions brought together market insiders, investors, and business leaders to map out concrete partnerships, supply chain solutions, and growth pathways both across Africa and into global export markets. Edmund Higginbottom from Verdant Capital led a session on how to build better links with Botswana.
We think it's important that we build the ecosystem, we build the investment ecosystem for small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and many of these businesses will become large companies and local champions and national champions over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I'm looking to meet interesting businesses here who are looking for funding over the next few years in Botswana, in the SADC region. We hope we'll be able to assist them through investments from our fund in 2026 and thereafter. And we're very happy to be supporting the ecosystem that we are attending.
The event concluded with high-energy pitch sessions featuring standout SMMEs from the Impact Finance Network. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
All right, the Central African Republic is heading for a critical test at the ballot box. President Faustin Archange Touadera has signed a decree calling voters to the polls on December 28th for presidential, legislative, regional and municipal elections. Authorities say the vote will mark an important step in consolidating democracy, with campaigning set to run from December 13th to the 26th. Opposition groups united under the Republican Bloc for the Defense of the Constitution are rejecting the process, pointing to unresolved political divisions and calling instead for dialogue before elections take place. As a build-up to these elections, we are now joined by political commentator, Advocate Sipho Mandula. Advocate, thank you so much for joining us. Jumbo Africa.
Jumbo Mo African, good evening, Molweni, Dumelang to your listeners across the African continent. An important subject matter, Mo Africa, as we are opening the October month, which some of us, we call it an Africa Human Rights Month. And issues of politics, elections, conflicts, national dialogue are part of our African human and people's rights discourse. So I think it is very important that we are dealing with a country that has a similarity with probably South Africa, a country also where South Africa lost some of its soldiers, if you can recall, in 2014. So it is important from our listeners in the south, in South Africa, to know where does Central African Republic resides or locates in the African continent. But as we have already said, it is an election year, it is a national dialogue moment, it is the AU and the UN interventions on the Central African Republic, its state of readiness towards its elections.
Yeah, indeed, Mo Africa. President Touadera has, framed this elections as a step towards consolidating democratic, institutions. Then my question is, in your view, Advocate, does the timing and structure of this vote strengthen, or weaken the fragile democratic framework?
No, you will understand that these elections have actually been delayed for several Yes, and you'll understand that despite that they might have announced it towards the end of the year, the issues that are important is the what I will call the fragile years of conflict in that country. And secondly, also, how do we look at the democratization process? How do we look at the current stability? Because here we are talking of elections that is less than 3 million people who are registered. And again, you ask yourself, this is a country also that we had many foreign security sector groupings that have been in Central African Republic. You will recall the Wagner group from the Russians that have been dealing with some military groups. You will understand also that CAR, it is in the belt of what I will call the conflict in the Horn of Africa. The crisis in Sudan, it also affects the Central African Republic. So when we have to look at Central African Republic, we should not look at it internally. We should also look at externally, the countries that it's bordering and how it will affect the changes of what is being muted now as the elections, but also they have launched their national dialogue process, because the national dialogue process also, you'll recall, it comes from the mediation by the United Nations. The African Union Peace and Security Council has also been engaging on the democratization and the peace process of the Central African Republic. How will they reach that process of undertaking elections? Despite that, we know that these are crucial elections of strengthening democratic governance, promoting reconciliation, consolidating stability, like I have said. But the main issue is that the elections are not a panacea in many African conflict zones.
Yeah, and Advocate, maybe you can enlighten us. I hear that you touched on it a little bit, but let's then talk about the significance, of this election. The fact that it's covering presidential, legislative, regional, and of course municipal levels at all at once. And what risks or opportunities does that present to a country like Central African Republic, and the significance of that?
I think you are raising an important issue. Even if they go for what we will always call harmonized elections or 3-in-1, the main issue is what I'll always we say in electoral studies, the issue of electoral funding, the donor support for this 2025 elections. It is also coupled with the issue of security. How do you emphasize on electoral security? But also what is important in this election, it is to look at what is it, what are the issues that they will be dealing with as they will be campaigning different political parties. You look at the challenges of economic development in that country being at the top, the issue of women, the role of women, but also external partners. Like I have said to you, that you have external and foreign countries that have an interest. But I think the main issue is that for the Central African Republic to go in these elections, you need to understand that it is for after many years that they never had local government elections. So it is important that the issue of peaceful environment, and the one aspect that we always don't touch on, electoral justice mechanism, that when things they don't go accordingly, where the electoral management bodies are not able to deliver their mandate, how do you redress the electoral disputes that might arise? Okay. And also the issue of when the conflict spill over, you also have refugees. Whenever you have elections in many conflict zones in Africa, just a week or 2 weeks before elections, you'll have movement of people leaving those villages, those settlements, because of a fear of what will be the outcome. So you see, those are the issues that whenever we go for the elections in Africa, we don't look at the what I will call the repercussions, that it instills fear in the citizens, it instills fear in the electorates.
Yeah, Mo Africa, it's always wonderful listening to you, enlightening us about the issues that has to do with the African continent. And thank you so much for your love for the continent. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Asante sana Mwafrika.
Asante sana indeed. That was political commentator, Advocate Sipho Mandula.
Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mukwena@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
All right. Now, the family of South Africa's late Nathi Mthethwa says they haven't received any formal communication from the South African National Congress Party as well as national government regarding his passing. The 58-year-old ambassador to France died in Paris yesterday after he reportedly fell from the 22nd floor at the Hyatt Regency Hotel. The family is currently gathering at Mthethwa's homestead in Kwambonambi on the KwaZulu-Natal North Coast. All right, for more reaction on that, we're joined on the line by South Africa's former Minister of International Relations, Mam Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Mam, a very good evening to you and thank you so much for making the time.
Oh, good evening to you too.
Yeah, just your initial reactions to the passing of former Minister Mthethwa.
Well, I was very shocked, very sad and pained by what I heard, because I've known Nathi since I came back from exile in 1990 when he was a young man, a very active young man, astute politician, but very humble, very respectful, and he has grown in politics and he has been in government, and I've known him all those years, and it's just very painful what has happened.
Yeah,
and our condolences and our sympathy goes to the family, the wife, the children, and the parents, and the whole neighborhood, but also the ANC and all his friends, colleagues. Yeah, it's very shocking and painful.
Yeah. Ma'am, this is someone that you've known for quite some time, and maybe perhaps just to reflect and celebrate his life, what are some of your fondest memories with former Ambassador Mthethwa?
Well, I can take you from the time of the Youth League, when we had the Youth League conference in Mpumalanga, and the ANC activities. He's someone who has always been jolly, but very astute politically, but also as a minister. I remember as Minister of Arts and Culture, he was very active. He came to communities, even to my community here in Herigwala in NTZ municipality, which is very rural. He was always making sure that he assists where he can. He connected with the people. He was never aloof. So I just remember him as a very good comrade and a person you can work with, a person you can trust in the work of government that I knew.
All right. Mom, thank you so very much, and condolences to you and the African National Congress as well. And thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Well, thank you.
All right, there you have it. Former South Africa's Minister of International Relations, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, reflecting on the passing of South Africa ambassador to France, that is the Nathi Mthethwa. Well, that conversation, of course, brings us to exactly 21:44 Central African time.
In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Thulisile Buddha, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Thulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Nighttime radio, just the way you like it, on Channel Africa, where the night comes alive.
Well, in today's workplace, history is unfolding in real time. For the first time ever, 5 generations are working side by side. Baby boomers, Generation X, millenniums, Generation Z, and now even the very first wave of Generation Alpha interns. Each brings with them different expectations, communication styles, and life experiences that shapes how they see work, success, and well-being. But perhaps nowhere are these differences more striking than when it comes to mental health and mental wellness. We're now joined by Nalvilka Ratanji, a critical psychologist and managing director at Lyra Southern Africa. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for making the time.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Yeah, I do know that in South Africa, in fact, October, we're celebrating mental health. We're recognizing it. But what does it actually look like when 5 generations collide in one workplace, from baby boomers, staying longer, to Gen Alphas just entered with the digital, fatigue?
Yeah, this is really a time where we see an unprecedented age spread at the moment. For the first time, organizations can have up to 5 generations represented in the workforce. And this means that they are at radically different life stages. They have different norms and different expectations. And all of this is colliding into one culture within the workplace. And so the impact that has is that, firstly, each of those generations have different needs, and they are impacted or have different comfort levels when talking about mental health in specific. So, for example, younger employees, especially the Gen Zs, they report feeling lower psychological safety to speak up, while older cohorts may still be carrying the stigma that relates to mental health, or this idea that they just have to get on with it and cope quietly. And so this really heightens the miscommunication and the missed opportunities to really care for employees in the workplace.
Yeah,
and a lot of...
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add that, in workplaces, there's often one leave policy, one work pattern, one benefits bundle, and it's used to serve so many different needs. And that's why we're positioning at this point that we need to consider a more segment-specific kind of approach.
Indeed. And Ratanji, then talk to us about how these generational overlaps, changing the culture, pace, and expectations of today's workplace. How is it overlapping?
So what we see with some of the generational patterning, we can see the differences that each of the cohorts are coming in. There is some overlap, but there are actually also key differences that we are seeing. So for example, if I can just talk about the positives that they bring into the workplace. So for example, the Gen Alphas, they bring speed into the workplace. They bring the smart and they bring new ways of thinking. Because remember, this was the generation born into iPads. So by the year 2030, they will represent 11% of the global workforce. But then they also face unique challenges like digital fatigue or cognitive overload. And this generation in particular is not very skilled at people skills or soft skills because they've grown up in this era of digitization. So you can imagine then that kind of generation is going to have very different mental health and well-being needs within the workplace. They're going to need to be supported in very different ways. So for example, workplaces would need to cater for having more focus zones where they can really offer virtual co-working spaces. They'll have to invest in soft skills for these individuals and mentorship programs and build emotional intelligence into the program. So that's just one example of actually how disparate the different generations can look like in terms of what the workforce is needing to prepare for, what the workplace is needing to prepare for.
Yeah. And Ratanji, why do mental health needs differ so sharply across generations? And in your view, how well are companies recognizing these differences? Do you get a sense that companies understand the dynamics?
I think companies are still coming out of the COVID pandemic where, it really shone a light on mental health and well-being as a whole. So employers are definitely taking mental health and well-being a lot more seriously in the workplace. But whether I can confidently say at this point that organizations are prepared and understand the diversity that is required in managing a multi-generational workforce, I think there are still some gaps in terms of understanding what actually needs to be done. We need to consider that there is perhaps a mismatch of needs. The same program for every person in the workplace, it really does ignore the different life stages that people find themselves in. For example, one generation may be struggling with hybrid loneliness. Another one is trying to deal with elder care or the dual responsibilities of caregiving and looking after the elders. And then you have the older generation that may even be dealing with chronic pain. And that's not something the younger generation is looking at. So if you think about the workplace well-being program then, it really does have to have multiple elements to reach the different generations. And this definitely does pose complexities for the workplace.
And speaking about the workplace, Navlika, then share with us what real risks do companies face if they do not adapt to, these shifts in mental health needs. What are some of the risks that companies might face?
Yeah, I think they do face the risk of not being an employer that individuals are attracted to work for. So I think it would reduce the talent pool if they feel like the company doesn't have specific programs to cater to their needs. Another risk from a employer perspective is really to create the right type of culture within the workplace if they don't consider these different needs that are needed. So they're not creating the right kind of culture of care, the psychological safety that's needed, and really having those bespoke programs so that they can say that, the diversity is welcomed. And in the long run, of course, that means that there's reduced productivity, there's increased absenteeism, and there is reduced innovation and creativity and teamwork within the organization if this is not considered seriously.
Navlika, thank you so very much for coming onto the show, and have a great evening ahead.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, there you have it. That was Navlika Ratanji, a clinical psychologist and managing director at Lyra Southern Africa. All right, it's that time of the evening where I welcome the beautiful Shayla into the studio to tell us about what's coming up on African Diaries between now and midnight. Shayla, good evening to you. And what have you prepared? What do you have for us in store?
Listen, we're talking relationships. It's a Wednesday. The focus, honestly, is just people engaging each other. So here's a trend I've noticed.
Yeah.
People no longer connect. We're very aloof in a friendship, a romantic relationship, whatever the ship is. We almost pretend like we don't want to be on this ship. We're at the side, we're almost hopping onto that stairway that gets us off the ship. And so the question is, why have we become so aloof in 2025? I mean, Innocent, I believe you're married, sir.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
100%.
And you're seeing this context where people
because
are so
when I
aloof.
got married, there are friends that I shared some friends because we're not aligned to the same vision. But I believe that true friendship is not that of calling each other every day, but is when you call each other after 2 months, it still feels like a relationship and friendship. That is true relationship for me and friendship.
That's another thing. So it's either we have this hyper dependency on people or we're completely aloof.
Yeah.
And what I've seen with relationships of any kind is that we've become so protective of self that we're forgetting that we're burning the bridge between ourselves and the person that we're in relationship with. So we have an opportunity to have this twofold conversation. The first hour, we're just looking at the landscape of dating specifically in 2025, which Mr. Innocent, you are so lucky to be married right now. That's what I'm going to say.
Are you saying the streets are cold?
There are no streets. It's a desert at this point. There are no streets.
Yeah.
The people say, we're out of the street. What streets? There's no pavement.
But you know what I heard? I'm hearing that a lot of people saying that those who are in, once out. Those who are out, once in. So it's like, I think people just need to be content and work with what they have, because I mean nobody told us that relationships and marriage is going to be easy. It's not easy at all. I mean, usually you're still trying to understand yourself. Here's the next person that you need to compromise and understand. It takes time, and it takes you to die of yourself. You know what I mean? So that you can accommodate other people. And when they're kids, it's even worse.
Don't discourage the way forward. We're trying to get people to interlock, be it in your friendship, in your relationship, and we're going to be doing this twofold. We have an opportunity to speak to a doctor by profession, but he's also a relationship coach on social media. His name is Tom Nduli, and he'll be joining us in the first hour. Then in the second hour of the show, we're going to be speaking to Thabang Mashego. Thabang is quite the brand, a psychology background. She speaks heavily on mental health, on just decomposing the state of mind that people are in. And so we're going to be touching base with her to say, why are we here and how do we get out? So that's the twofold conversation.
But I think also, wouldn't you agree that people should not go to marriage or relationships thinking that it's going to be all rosy, you know what I mean? So they must be prepared that there will be these challenges, so that you know that I'm going into this, there will be challenges, but I have to have a staying power. And everyone has got a different staying power. I'll tell you mine one day.
Please do, because we need it for this lot that's behind me, and that's between 10 and midnight.
All right, there you have it. She's with you until midnight. That's a wrap from tonight's installment of Africa World Hour from myself, Innocent Semosa. Of course, was in for Tsepiso Makwetla and the rest of the African World Hour team. Thank you for listening. For your comments on the show, send us an email at info@channelafrica.org. From myself, Innocent Semosa, it's a goodbye and God bless.
Nighttime radio. Just the way you like it, on Channel Africa, where the night comes alive.